Hi, friends and family of Little River Physical Therapy. Today I'm here with a special guest, Kayleigh Newman, who is now going to be working at Little River Physical Therapy and is currently training to become a physical therapist. We're going to dive into her background and how she got interested in physical therapy, some of her research experience, and we'll also learn some more about her excitement about what she'll be studying within physical therapy in the future. Hi, Kayleigh. How are you doing today?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm good. Okay, could you start out by telling our listeners a little bit about your childhood experiences as a gymnast and how that led you into becoming interested in physical therapy?
So I did start off as a gymnast at a very young age, and I did that for about 16 years, so from about 3 to age 19. Um, and so that was pretty fundamental in me finding a love for movement and exercise in general. Um, and I would say I started to notice some of the gymnasts, the older gymnasts from across the gym, and I found myself in between turns waiting to do my own skills, just kind of watching them and like the shape that their body made and what we call in gymnastics, like the lines of their body, so the straight lines between their shoulders, their hips, and their legs. So I would really watch that, and I would watch how the particular group did their strength training, and I got to see the time and effort and dedication that they put into the strength training that they did. And I really saw how that translated to their gymnastics and how this group had super clean gymnastics that was just beautiful to watch. So that's when I started to notice that I really liked watching people's movement and analyzing how different people moved. And then as I got older, as a gymnast, I found myself as a patient in physical therapy on multiple occasions. Um, and so eventually I started to kind of put together that physical therapy might be a good path for me. I remember being in physical therapy and asking the physical therapist to describe what she was doing and describe why she was doing it and basically give me an educational lesson on physical therapy. And that was a good indicator that physical therapy was a good route for me. So it was kind of a combination of um, loving watching people's movements as a child and then wanting to pursue some type of medical field, and then this kind of perfect union of me being in physical therapy, wanting to pursue medicine, and I was, wow, I think physical therapy might be the route for me. That was a long way of saying it, but yeah.
No, that was really interesting. Yeah, it seems like your interest really developed a lot over time. So, were there any particular moments while you were at a physical therapy session where it just clicked for you? Like, oh, wow, I'm interested in actually studying this myself.
I wouldn't say there was a specific moment that I can put my hands on of when I was a patient, but it was kind of a accumulation of different times I was in physical therapy where I realized it was something that I was really interested in. And then I had an opportunity as an undergrad to attend a little, I'm not sure what you would call it, like seminar, hands-on type experience at Duke University with their physical therapy students. So I went there for a week and I was just immersed in all things physical therapy, talking to their students, talking to professors, seeing their labs, seeing the tools they had. And that is where I kind of solidified my desire to be in physical therapy. I just kind of saw all the different avenues that you can pursue in physical therapy and all the different specialties that I didn't even know existed. And I just really felt after that week that physical therapy is where I was meant to be.
So, what's an example of like a niche specialty that you found out about?
Oh, I mean, there's so many. Some of the ones I found really interesting were neuro PT, so working with patients who have had a stroke or a spinal cord injury or something like that, where you're trying to um, reconnect their brain with their body. That was super interesting that I didn't really know existed. Um, and another one was pelvic floor. And just the depth of knowledge that you have to be able to treat someone's pelvic floor and how treating someone's pelvic floor can really change their quality of life. It's something that I don't think is talked about a lot, but it's super important. Like urinary incontinence, being able to control your bowels, sexual dysfunction, like those things are really intimate and really can have a huge impact on someone's life if you're able to affect that area of their life.
Wow. So recently you were involved in a research project about the movements of soldiers and firefighters. So that is something that I'm sure is hugely impactful for not just the people's lives they are working with, but also the people's lives that these individuals are serving. So could you like explain to our listeners a bit about your research, what you were looking for, and what you found?
Yeah, so that project that you're referring to was kind of my first taste of research. As an undergrad, I was invited to be part of this project, and so we had firefighters and law enforcement officers come into our lab, and we would do a bunch of different tests on them. Some cardiovascular fitness tests, some body composition, so like body fat, muscle mass testing, and then we also did a lot of strength testing and a lot of mobility testing. And that was really interesting because the particular group of firefighters and law enforcement we were working with was a group that was considered on the lower fitness side of the spectrum. So we had them come in for testing to get a baseline of their fitness and their mobility. And then we provided them with an 8-week home exercise program, particularly working on strength. It was mostly gym-based movements that they could do like at their fire department, workouts, things like that. And then if we noticed different mobility issues, we'd also give them exercises to work on that. The idea of the project was that firefighters would then come back into the lab after that period of time where they were working out on their own, and we would retest all these measures and see if anything improved. This was an interesting project because we actually only had one firefighter return after the 8 weeks. So it was a good lesson for me as a new researcher to kind of get a sense that sometimes this is how research goes, and it's not always perfect, and you don't always get to write a beautiful paper with great findings and conclude that your intervention worked. Sometimes it doesn't, and that was kind of my experience there. So we didn't really get to conclude with many findings because we just didn't have the data.
Oh wow, that must have been really frustrating.
It was a little disappointing, but again, it was a great experience and a great thing for me to be able to witness as a young researcher, to see that this is the reality of research. Sometimes things go wrong, sometimes it doesn't work out perfectly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It shows like how sometimes if there's a gap of research or evidence in something, it could be that there were researchers looking into it and they simply couldn't get the data.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what did you really enjoy about conducting the research? If there were parts that you still really enjoyed.
Oh, I definitely enjoyed it. I just love the process of actually collecting the data and working with people who weren't used to being in a research setting and kind of explaining to them what we're doing, why we're doing things in the order that we're doing them, what we're looking for. Because there's a lot of strictness in research and specific ways that you have to do different procedures that you're doing to get like reliable and valid data. So that was really fun to be able to explain, and then obviously if we had data at the end to kind of look at the hypothesis and kind of see if the data backed up that hypothesis, that was always cool. As I got into other projects, we ended up having data to kind of make conclusions. So that was also cool to be able to see like, oh, what we did actually made a difference, and we actually have findings, and we actually have something that we can write an interesting paper about.
Yeah. So, in your other research, like what kinds of findings did you have with the other data that was available?
I've worked on multiple different projects. Let's see. One of the more interesting ones was I helped on a project where we had people do 2 different maximal effort exercise tests. So one was a running test where they would be running on a treadmill, and the test would slowly get harder and harder until they decided to stop. So it's a very challenging test.
That
The
sounds
other
really
one
hard.
was on a bike, and it was basically the same. It would get slowly faster and slowly more difficult to pedal until they decided to stop. And then after that, before and after they did both of those exercise tests, we would have them do some balance exercises on force plates. So they would be standing on these plates that can measure how their weight shifts. And we would try to see if there was a difference between the bike and the treadmill.
It's really interesting. I've never heard of this concept of maximal effort before.
Oh yeah, this is one of the tests that your mom did.
Oh,
She did the
really?
running one. Yeah.
Wow. Do you feel like
Yeah,
there is a sense, like, do you feel like people really are able to put in their maximal effort without, like, fear? Like, I mean, like, you know how if, like, a bear was chasing you, you'd be able to run at your max speed. Do you think, like, when
yeah.
you do this test, do you think they're actually able to run at their max speed or no?
That's a really good question. I feel like they are, um, because when you're getting prepped for this test and we're kind of explaining how it works, you start getting nervous because you're thinking, oh, this is a max effort test. Like, I gotta perform well. They're gonna be watching my results. They're gonna be analyzing how I'm doing and like judging me, kind of. So you do get
Yeah.
a little bit stressed out, and I think it does make you perform a little bit better than you would if you were just like, on your own in your backyard, like running around.
Yeah, wow.
Anxiety producing, and you get adrenaline, and I think you do perform pretty well.
It's kind of stressing me out just thinking about it.
It's really, really hard. Like, you have to psych yourself up for it.
I feel like my results would be like, you would not survive running out of a building on fire. I'd be like, oh no.
It's a cool test though, because we can also see if you're actually working as hard as you can.
Like,
There's
how?
there's a
How do you
specific
see
measure.
that?
It's called the RER, so it's your respiratory exchange ratio, and it shows us how much carbon dioxide and oxygen that you're breathing out. So we can use that to see if you're at your maximal exchange rate.
Oh, wow.
So if you stop too early and you like could have pushed yourself more, that number will be too low, and we'll be able to see like, oh, you weren't really working.
So
that
what
hard.
happens then? Would you like tell the person like, hey, I know you can do more, like a coach, or are you just like silent, like judging?
Well, so a lot of the times when I'm doing these tests, people are coming in and paying for it. So they want me to explain the results and they want to know how they did. So oftentimes I'll say, usually for this RER number, we generally see it between like this range and this range. And I'll say, yours is on the lower side, so it's possible you might have been able to go a little bit further. And then I kind of say it softly like that.
That's a very gentle way of saying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, what did you find like usually is the stopping point that means that they can't go further? Is it like their breath or like their legs or like what
So
holds
the way
them back?
the test works is that it slowly increases in incline and it increases in speed. And most people say that the incline is what gets them. Like, they could go faster,
Oh, I didn't
they
realize
just
it
can't keep running up
also.
a hill.
Yeah, I didn't realize it also increased in incline.
Yeah, that's the tough part.
Wow. Oh, that's
Because
really
you don't actually
hard.
run that fast. It's not like you're doing a sprint for 10 minutes. It's the
Oh,
incline that's
yeah,
hard.
I was picturing a sprint. Well, because then your knees would be at like a weird angle going like way uphill, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like that incline. It's maybe like that when it gets to be really hard.
Oh, okay. Still, that seems pretty hard. Have you done it yourself?
Yeah, I've done it twice. It's not fun.
Yeah, I can't imagine it would be. Do you at least like play music for them or something? Like really like hyped up music?
No, so music has been shown. We don't really know, but it seems that music can alter like how you perform.
Oh wow.
So
Would it
we
make you
don't let
perform
people listen
better?
to music because that might be like encouraging and that could change the results. That's the theory that I've heard.
Wow. So
So yeah, it's just you and the treadmill.
so you can't listen to music. But then how could that mean that like that's your like maximum effort, but you might do better if you were listening to music? That's weird to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I'm not entirely sure. That's just the theory that I've heard explained. Yeah. That's a good point, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. Is there any other pieces of research that you found really interesting that you worked on?
Oh, there was one project where we went out into the field and we were working with firefighters who were doing a practice burn. So there were some condemned houses and they were burning them down to just kind of simulate um, what they would encounter if they encountered a structure fire. So they would light the building on fire and they would go inside and they would look at the smoke patterns and eventually put it out. And so we put some monitors on them to monitor their temperature and their heart rate and their breathing rate and their position. Um, and it wasn't like a formal research study. We were kind of just gathering data to see if we might want to do a formal thing. But that was really cool for us to watch as researchers, because it's one thing to have someone like come into the lab and we test them in the lab, but it's a whole other thing to go into the field and test them while they're actually doing their job. So that was just a cool experience to obviously see a house burn down, but then to see the live data coming in too and watch how heart rate and temperature were changing, especially in a hot environment.
Wow, that sounds like, I mean, I would wonder, like, how do you even know is their heart rate going up because they're exercising a lot or because they're stressed? Or is that just like part of the same
Yeah,
research?
I mean, it was definitely, there were, both of those were in play for sure. Your heart rate rises when it gets hot, your heart rate rises when you do exercise, and even just the gear that they wear to go into like a firefighting situation can be super, super heavy. So even just walking around with that gear, not being in a stressful situation, your heart rate's going to rise a lot. So then you add the gear on top, you add the stress of the situation, you add the heat, and you could see huge increases in the heart rate. That's why it's so important for firefighters to be fit to be able to do their job.
Yeah, wow. For somebody that's like interested in just like the human body and watching the human body, that must have been really interesting to see people like put under such extreme conditions.
Yes, and it was interesting as well because it was a simulated situation. So of course they weren't say as stressed as they would have been if it was a true house fire and if they were like people trapped inside.
Yeah.
But it was definitely still interesting to see the data change as they went into the structure.
So, out of all of the research projects that you've done, which one was your favorite?
Um, the first one, the first one was really fun. I was working with a bunch of other young interns, and it was also their first research experience. So we just kind of had a good time working together and kind of being like new to it together and not really knowing what we were doing. Um, I also really liked some of the later ones I've gotten to work on. We've been doing some hydration testing recently, so we have had people come into the lab and we kind of dehydrate them throughout the course of the day,
Oh my
and we see
gosh.
how their performance changes cognitively and then in terms of physical performance. And they're in a hot room biking for a good portion of the day. So that's been a fun project. That's been different than my other projects because we're actually like testing their sweat and analyzing it, and we're using like a pipette, and we have these like a centrifuge to like spin down the sweat. So that's been just a whole new experience for me. So that's been fun.
Wow, Kayleigh, you are running these like torture machine experiments.
It's fun. Each project is a little bit different, and it's really cool to learn about all the different stuff that is relevant for each new project.
That's really cool. So, you've also spent some time shadowing physical therapists. Could you talk about some of your experiences with shadowing PTs and what that was like?
Yeah, so I shadowed a couple of different PTs in a couple different offices. One of the ones I really enjoyed was at a physical therapy office, and the physical therapist was a recent grad, actually from Duke. And one of the patients she was working with that I got to see a couple times was a ballerina. And this ballerina was a pretty high-level ballerina. He was a professional. This was his full-time job, and he had recently had an ACL surgery, and he was getting back to kind of moving it for the first time after surgery when I first met him. So I saw the PT do very basic mobilizations of the scar, and just very basic range of motion stuff with him. And then I got to see a little while later, a few months later when I came back, the progress that he had made. And I watched him walking normally and starting to do some very basic ballet moves. And that was just so cool to see the progress that he had made. And I know how much effort he must have put into therapy every single day to get back to that that level that he was at. So that was a really cool experience.
Wow, that sounds really amazing to be able to help somebody whose like body and the way they move it is so core to their job.
Yeah, and he was obviously really physically. He really obviously wanted to get back to doing ballet, but also the mental load of not being able to do what he wanted to do, and just how sad he felt. You could see that in his body language, that he was just really distraught over this injury. And he was saying how he would go to practice and he would watch the other ballerinas working on their ballet skills, and he wouldn't be able to do it. He'd just be stuck there with his like resistance bands or whatever, doing his knee exercises, and he couldn't participate.
Oh, so that's the other thing I was going to ask actually is what is an ACL injury? So is it a knee injury? Could you explain what
Yeah,
that is?
so the ACL is one of the ligaments in your knee. So it runs between your femur and your tibia, and it just kind of provides stability to the knee, and it's towards the front of that joint. So it's kind of right under the patella. So yeah, it's a pretty major injury, and it requires a not fun surgery. So
Ooh,
yeah, he had been dealing with a lot.
wow. So, based on your time shadowing physical therapists and your interest in physical therapy, what do you think are the key skills for a physical therapist to have?
Gosh, I think there are so many. I think obviously a really deep understanding of anatomy and physiology, to understand what's going on in the joint or in the body that's contributing to the pain or the issue. A deep understanding of strength training and how to make someone stronger for like specific muscles. I also think listening is a really key skill for physical therapists. So being able to listen to the patient and how they're describing their injury and what it feels like. Also being able to listen to their goals and what they want to get back to, so they can kind of make a plan to tailor their physical therapy exercises to exactly what the patient wants to be able to do following therapy. I think it's also important that physical therapists have a little bit of creativity, like a creative mindset, because a lot of different sports movements are not identical to the movements found in physical therapy or like in a gym setting. So if you take, for example, like a baseball bat, a physical therapist would have to think how to mimic that motion and the particular motion that is causing pain, whether it's like the beginning of the swing or the end of the swing or whatever, in a physical therapy setting. So different arrangements of resistance bands and weights at various strengths and stuff, so they can work with the patient to get that motion back and then make them stronger in that motion.
So, are there any times where you've seen this kind of creative thinking that you just described being used in a clinic setting or in a research?
Okay, yes, I have two examples that I think kind of illustrate this. The first one is I was working with a physical therapist who had a patient who was a CrossFit athlete, and the athlete was struggling with different overhead exercises. So, for example, like holding a barbell above their head often caused a lot of pain. That's a common thing that's done in CrossFit. A bunch of different movements require pushing weight above the head. So the athlete was having pain with that, and the physical therapist did a bunch of tests and kind of figured out that it was some rotator cuff stability issues. So they had the patient press a barbell overhead, and then on either side of the barbell, they attached resistance bands, and then they tied kettlebells to the resistance bands. So if you can picture this like elaborate image, the patient has the barbell above their head and then kettlebells dangling off either side of the barbell. So it's a really wiggly barbell. It's moving around a lot, and it's really difficult to hold that overhead in a steady fashion. So they then had the patient just kind of walk back and forth in the clinic. You could see that the exercise was very difficult for the patient, and it really worked on activating all the shoulder muscles, and it even went as far down as I would say it was a full body exercise because they're walking, and definitely a lot of core activation was necessary for the exercise, considering how far the weight is from the patient's from the center of their body. So that was really cool to see that kind of creative thinking. In another physical therapy clinic that I was shadowing at, they had an older patient who frequently had balance issues. And so the physical therapist created a little obstacle course for the patient. So they had like different little hurdles for them to step over. They had a little like balance beam type board. They had some wobbly boards where it's kind of squishy when you step on it. And the patient said she was having trouble like keeping her balance when she was walking and when she was multitasking. So the physical therapist had her do the obstacle course a couple times to get used to it. And then she had the patient start talking to her. So she started having them do like a multitasking type exercise. So the patient was, I don't know, telling a story or something, explaining how to do something while doing the obstacle course. And then that was definitely more difficult. You could see she kind of slowed down going through the obstacle course, and she did kind of wobble a little bit. And then once she got better at that, the physical therapist had her add in some side-to-side looking, so she would be turning her head as she walked through the obstacle course. And she said this was kind of mimicking like window shopping, or if you're walking and having a conversation with a friend, you have to focus on walking and balancing, but also looking to the side to interact with the person you're speaking to, and maybe looking over to the road to make sure there are no cars coming, window shopping, different things like that. So those were definitely cool to see how they're mimicking different types of like realistic life experiences in the PT clinic.
Wow, it's so cool to see how much personalization there is in physical therapy. That it's not like going to a doctor, I guess, or other medical environment where they just have like pills to give you or something. But
Yes,
that
that's
they're
a great
really,
point too. Physical
yeah,
therapists, it's easy to see how much physical therapists care. Um, and yeah, personalized exercises, it's really cool. Each physical therapist that I've shadowed has kind of a different repertoire of exercises. So it's interesting to see how each person addresses each patient differently. You know, even if it was the same patient, they might provide different exercises.
that's so cool. So, could you talk a little bit more about your future plans with pursuing physical therapy and what you're looking forward to?
So first and foremost would be finishing physical therapy school. While I'm doing that, I'm also obviously working at Little River Physical Therapy, so I'm very excited about that. I've been working with Dr. Fisher on some of the continuing education classes, which has been great for me to go through that material and then work with Dr. Fisher too on some of the hands-on parts of that course. Um, yeah, so I'm very excited to finish physical therapy school. And I'm not entirely sure what field I want to pursue, like in terms of specialties. I'd love to learn more about pelvic floor physical therapy and shadow some of that. As I talked about earlier, I also think neurophysical therapy is really fascinating. So that would be very cool to learn more about. I also enjoy working with athletes, so maybe something like that I could see myself doing. So yeah, we'll see.
Wow, that's so exciting. Thank you so much for talking with us today and letting everyone at Little River Physical Therapy get to know you a bit more. We're so excited to have you here.
Yes, this was really fun, and I hope I'll see you all in the clinic sometime.